Dead America, Tales from Las Vegas, The Breakdown, by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. The sun poked its head up over the horizon, bathing the Nellis base in light. Despite the early hour, dozens of people were already up and moving, preparing for the day ahead. Martin was one of them, stretching his sore muscles as he stepped out of the barracks. Despite only being 35, he had a lot of mileage on his body, spending the better part of the previous 2 decades as a mechanic. His shoulder pinched as he rotated it, a relic from his previous life. The joint protested the movement, a reminder that his body had accumulated wear faster than the calendar suggested it should. He rolled his neck from side to side, working out the stiffness that came from sleeping on a military cot. The barracks weren't designed for comfort, but they beat the alternative. At least here he had a roof over his head and walls between him and the things that roamed the streets. Martin took a moment to look around the base as the morning light spread across the tarmac. Activity had already begun in earnest. A group of civilians jogged past, their shoes hitting the pavement in disjointed rhythm. Near one of the hangars, a team was loading supplies into the back of a transport truck. The base had transformed into something resembling a well-oiled machine over the past couple weeks, everyone finding their role in the new reality they were living in. "Morning, Martin. You ready for another day out there?" Carrie asked. Martin turned to see Carrie approaching, her shoulder-length dark hair bouncing with each step. Despite only being a few years younger than him, she looked far more youthful. While waiting tables had its share of challenges, artificially aging someone apparently wasn't one of them. Her eyes were bright despite the early hour, and she carried herself with an energy that Martin envied. "Good morning, Carrie. Sleep okay last night?" Martin asked. "Yeah, after that last trip out I was completely wiped. Who knew that sitting in a party bus for 12 hours could take it out of you?" Carrie said. Martin let out a chuckle, slowing down his pace so that Carrie could catch up. She fell into step beside him, adjusting the straps of the small backpack she wore. The two of them had been partnered up on runs for the past week, and they had developed an easy rapport. It made the long hours on the road more bearable. The two of them walked in silence for half a mile, both of them just enjoying the calm of the morning. The base stretched out around them, a collection of buildings and hangars that had become a sanctuary for hundreds of survivors. In the distance, Martin could see the control tower rising above the other structures, its windows reflecting the morning sun. As they got their target hangar within view, they heard rapid footsteps coming from behind them. The sound carried clearly in the quiet air, shoes slapping against pavement in a sprint. The duo turned to see Wesley running hard towards them, carrying a canvas bag over his shoulder. The bag bounced against his side with each stride. "Wait up! I'm here! I'm here!" Wesley called out. The two of them stopped in their tracks, waiting on the third member of their party to close the gap. Wesley was a decade younger than either of them, tall with an athlete's build. Even from a distance, Martin could see the strain on his face from the run. "Slow down, man. We got plenty of time before our shift starts," Martin said. Wesley kept his pace until he got within 20 yards of the duo, finally slowing down. As he approached, he gasped for air, taking several deep breaths to steady himself. His face was flushed, and sweat had started to form on his forehead, despite the cool morning temperature. "How far did you run?" Carrie asked. "All the way from the mess hall," Wesley said. "Jesus, man, you know you can hitch a ride with someone, don't you?" Martin asked. Wesley straightened up, still catching his breath, but managing to form words between gulps of air. "We're about to spend 12 hours locked in a bus. I want to spend as much time outside as I possibly can," Wesley said. Martin and Carrie exchanged a glance, shrugging and nodding in agreement with the sentiment. It was hard to argue with that logic. The runs were long and confined, the windows of the party bus offering only limited views of the world outside. Any chance to be in open air was worth taking. Carrie then reached out, grabbing the canvas bag from the tired young man. The weight of it nearly toppled her over, forcing her to adjust her stance to compensate. "What the hell is in here?" Carrie asked. "Our usual meals, plus some extra snacks," Wesley said. Carrie opened up the bag, her and Martin looking into it. The contents were packed tight, multiple packages and containers filling the space. The mechanic looked through it for a moment, before looking back at the young man. "There's nearly twice as much in here as they usually give us," Martin said. Wesley perked up, putting on some false charm. A smile crossed his face, the kind that suggested he thought he was being clever. "Well, that cute girl was behind the counter this morning. so I sweet-talked her into giving me a little extra. I think she likes me, Wesley said. Martin grabbed one of the MRE meals, seeing what variety it was, before letting out a laugh. He turned the package over in his hands, reading the label with amusement. "Oh, I hate to break it to you, brother, but she most certainly does not like you," Martin said. "What makes you say that?" Wesley asked. Martin turned the MRE around, revealing it to Wesley. "Because she gave you a couple extra pouches of vegetable omelet," Martin said. Carrie spoke up without hesitation. "I call whatever isn't that," Carrie said. "Me too," Martin said. Wesley was too dejected to speak up, accepting his fate. His head dropped, the realization settling in that he had been played. The vegetable omelet MRE was notorious among the survivors, universally despised for its questionable texture and taste. Carrie gave him a motivational smack on the arm, trying to lift his spirits. "Don't worry, I'm sure there's a great girl out there for you," Carrie said. "Yeah, man, we just have to get those zombies away from her house," Martin said. Despite their best efforts, Wesley continued to be dejected. He shouldered the canvas bag again, the weight of it now feeling heavier than before. "Come on, let's see where we're going today," Wesley said. Wesley pushed through them, leading the group into the hangar. The large doors were already open, revealing the interior space filled with party buses in various states of preparation. The garish vehicles looked out of place in the military setting, their bright colors and flashy designs at odds with the utilitarian surroundings. As they crossed the threshold, they were greeted by Private Thomas, who stood holding a clipboard. The soldier looked up as they approached, checking something on his paperwork. "Good morning. Are you my Team 3? Thomas asked. "That's us," Martin said. Thomas nodded before scanning his clipboard for a moment. Once he saw the information he needed, he waved for the trio to follow him. They walked over to a folding table set up against the wall. A map of the city sprawled out across its surface. The map was marked up extensively, showing the progress of their efforts over the past weeks. A quarter of the space on the outer edges of the city was colored in green, signifying that those areas were mostly clear of creatures. The central portion of the city wasn't colored in, but had red poker chips sitting in each section, signifying danger. Martin could see the concentration of red chips near the strip, a visual representation of just how bad things were in the heart of the city. "So, where are we headed today?" Carrie asked. Thomas talked as he pointed to the map, focusing on the southern portion of the city after tracing around the outer edge. "This should be a straightforward run today. You're going to stick to the outer loop of the city, getting around to the south side. You're to cross the 15 and patrol the neighborhoods south of the airport," Thomas said. Thomas reached onto the table for a stack of papers inside a clear file folder, handing it over to Martin. The mechanic took it, flipping through the pages to get a sense of the route. "I have your route mapped out there. You'll hit all the target streets before coming out on Highway 160 headed west out of town. Once you get on the other side of the mountain, put a few miles between you and the mob and pull over," Thomas said. "Yeah, and Melvin will come, give us a ride back to base." "We know, man. We've been making runs for over 2 weeks now," Martin said. Thomas could sense the frustration in Martin's voice at being told the same thing yet again. But the private didn't push back. Instead, he altered his tone a bit, to one that came off as more speaking as an equal rather than a supervisor speaking to a subordinate. "You're right, and since you've done this before, then you'll know to be on the lookout for zombies once you clear town. We've had several runs out the 160, and while we hope those things have wandered out into the desert, there's a chance some of them are still hanging around," Thomas said. Martin took the words to heart, nodding to the private. The reminder was a good one, even if the delivery had been repetitive. Getting complacent on these runs could get you killed. "Thanks for the heads up," Martin said. "Do you have any other questions?" Thomas asked. "I think we're ready to go, soldier," Martin said. "All right, be safe out there," Thomas said. The trio nodded to the soldier before walking over to their party bus. The vehicle sat in its designated spot, its exterior decorated with swirling patterns and bright colors that had once advertised a good time. Now it served a different purpose entirely, its speakers and lights repurposed to draw the dead away from the living. Martin settled in behind the steering wheel as the other two found their overstuffed seats in the back. The driver's seat was worn but comfortable, positioned behind a dashboard that looked like it belonged in a nightclub rather than a vehicle. Lights and switches covered the panel, each one controlling some aspect of the bus's sound or lighting system. Before sitting down, Wesley walked to the very back of the bus, dropping the canvas bag filled with food next to a small stockpile of weapons. There were no guns in the collection, but plenty of spears and baseball bats. The weapons were a last resort, meant for emergencies when the plan went sideways. So far, the trio had been lucky enough not to need them. The mechanic started up the party bus, the engine making an odd sound as it rumbled to life. The noise caught Martin's attention, different enough from the normal startup to raise a flag. He was concerned for a moment, listening intently to it as it idled. Years of working on engines had trained his ear to pick up on problems before they became critical. Carrie could see Martin looking intently at the front end of the vehicle, his head cocked slightly to one side as he focused on the sound. "Is everything okay, Martin?" Carrie asked. The mechanic didn't respond, keeping his focus fully on the engine. He listened to it for a good 20 seconds, hearing nothing out of the ordinary beyond that initial startup. The engine settled into its normal rhythm, the vibration steady and consistent. Finally, he managed to convince himself that he hadn't heard anything significant. "Yeah, we're good, Carrie," Martin said. Martin threw the bus into drive, glancing back at the others through the rear-view mirror. Wesley had settled into one of the seats, already pulling out a book to read. Carrie was checking the straps on her backpack, making sure everything was secure. "You two get comfortable back there. We got a bit of a drive ahead of us." Chapter 2. Carrie struggled to keep her eyes open as they drove slowly through a pack of zombies in a neighborhood. The weeks of clearing creatures from the streets of Las Vegas was certainly taking its toll on her, but the boredom of it all was weighing on her the most. The music continued to blast through the speakers, the same song that she had heard so many times in recent days, boring a hole into her mind. She knew it was going to take months of not hearing it for the tune to fade from memory. Before that could happen, however, they needed to finish the task. The bass thumped through the floor of the bus, vibrating her seat with each beat. Outside the windows, zombies pressed against the vehicle, their dead eyes tracking the movement as the bus crawled past. They reached for the source of the noise, arms extending toward the speakers mounted on the exterior. The creatures stumbled after them, drawn by the promise of sound and light. Carrie shook her head forcefully, trying to wake herself up. The motion did little to clear the fog from her mind, but it was something. As she struggled, Wesley sat down across from her, offering up a water bottle. "I grabbed it from the refrigerator, so it should be cold," Wesley said. "Thanks, Wesley," Carrie said. Carrie cracked the top open, taking a long sip before pouring a bit on her face. The cool liquid shocked her system, perking her up. The water ran down her cheeks and dripped onto her shirt, but she didn't care. The sudden cold was exactly what she needed. "What time is it anyway?" Carrie asked. Wesley looked down to his wrist, letting out a laugh as he realized he wasn't wearing a watch. "I think it's sometime after lunch," Wesley said. "Have you eaten?" Carrie asked. "Yeah, but I can fix you something too," Wesley said. Carrie shook her head before taking another drink of water. She groaned as she pulled herself out of her seat, stretching. Her back popped as she extended her arms above her head, the sound audible even over the music. "I appreciate it, but I need to move a bit. I'm going to see if Martin wants something," Carrie said. Wesley nodded as Carrie walked up to the front of the bus, Martin sitting tall and focused. The vehicle moved from side to side ever so slightly as they pushed through a pack of zombies. Each impact sent a small shudder through the frame, the creatures bouncing off the reinforced exterior. "How are we looking out here?" Carrie asked. "I'm about to call it good and hit the highway," Martin said. Carrie stepped over to the side, adjusting her view so that she could get a look at the horde behind them in the side mirror. The road was thick with them, stretching from sidewalk to sidewalk, and going back as far as her view could see. The mass of bodies moved as one, a river of the dead, following the bus through the suburban streets. "So what do you think?" Carrie asked. "A couple of those neighborhoods were pretty packed, and that strip mall with the supercenter, conservatively?" 15,000, Martin said. "That's not bad for a day's work," Carrie said. Martin got up to the next intersection, spotting the sign for Highway 160. He sat there for a moment, grinning at the sight. The green sign marked the transition from city streets to open highway, a welcome change after hours of navigating residential areas. "Well, the bad news is, the day is only half over. The good news, however, is that the day is half over," Martin said. Martin pointed to the sign, prompting a smile from Carrie. "I'm going to grab some lunch. Do you want some?" Carrie asked. "I'll take anything but that vegetable omelet," Martin said. Carrie chuckled, patting him on the shoulder as she moved to the back of the bus to fix lunch. Meanwhile, Martin hit the gas, pulling onto the highway. The next 2.5 hours were slow moving, but an easy drive. The highway was mostly clear of cars, and only a small smattering of zombies roaming around, who had found their way back towards the city after being lured out of it. The creatures were spread out along the roadside, isolated and easier to avoid than the dense packs they had dealt with earlier. Wesley sat behind the steering wheel, taking over for a tired Martin, who was stretched out on one of the overstuffed seats in the back. The mechanic rarely allowed the others to drive, especially in the city, but the straight drives out of town were a different story. Martin had his eyes closed, his breathing steady as he tried to catch whatever rest he could manage. Wesley kept the pace set low, barely a few miles an hour, not wanting to lose the pack of zombies behind them. The horde had thinned somewhat during the highway portion of the drive, some of the creatures falling behind as they struggled to maintain the pace. But enough remained to make the effort worthwhile. He was forced to give the bus a little more gas as the road started to go at an incline as they moved up the mountain. The engine note changed, working harder against the grade. Wesley pressed down on the accelerator to compensate. "Don't go too fast, Wesley. We can't lose them just yet," Carrie said. "I know, Carrie. This isn't my first time driving," Wesley said. Carrie let it go as Wesley pushed a little harder on the gas as the bus struggled to maintain its speed. The vehicle labored against the slope, the added weight of the reinforced exterior and sound equipment making the climb more difficult. When he did, however, a horrible whine came from the engine. The sound cut through the music, a high-pitched metallic scream that made Carrie wince. Something was wrong. That much was clear even to her untrained ear. Martin sat straight up in his seat from a laying position, fear in his eyes as he listened to the engine. The noise continued, getting worse as Wesley pressed down on the gas. The mechanic's face went pale, recognition settling in as he identified the problem. Before Martin could get to his feet, the bus lurched forward as if the brakes were suddenly hit. The sudden deceleration caught everyone off guard. Carrie nearly lost her footing, but managed to catch herself on the seat. "What the hell are you doing up there, Wesley?" Carrie asked. "It's not me, it's the bus," Wesley said. Wesley slammed on the gas pedal, trying to get it moving again, which caused the engine noise to get worse. The whine became a shriek, the sound of metal grinding against metal. Martin leapt from his seat, rushing to the front of the bus while yelling. "Let off the gas! Let off the gas!" Martin said. Wesley was confused by the order, looking into the side mirror at the zombie horde that was only 30 yards behind them. The creatures were closing the gap, their arms outstretched as they pursued the slowing vehicle. "But those things," Wesley said. Martin got to the front of the bus, grabbing Wesley by the shirt and yanking him out of the seat, taking it for himself. The young man stumbled to the side, making room for the mechanic to work. Martin shifted the bus into a lower gear, gently pressing down on the gas. He managed to get the bus moving slowly up the incline, but it wasn't fast enough to keep pace with the zombies behind them. The creatures were gaining ground, the distance between them and the bus shrinking with each passing second. Come on, don't die on me," Martin said. Carrie moved up to the front of the bus, standing beside Wesley, both of them concerned at the noise coming from the engine and how slowly they were moving. The transmission continued to whine, the sound setting everyone's teeth on edge. "Martin," Carrie said. The mechanic held his hand up, getting her to stay quiet for a moment as he listened to the engine. He adjusted the pressure on the gas pedal, managing to get them moving at speed again. The bus accelerated slightly, pulling away from the immediate threat. As the others breathed a sigh of relief, he reached down for the radio, clicking it on. "Come in, Nellis. This is Team 3. Mayday, Mayday, this is Team 3, and we're in trouble," Martin said. Both Carrie and Wesley struggled to keep composed, both of them focused on the mirrors, watching the zombies close behind them. The horde continued its pursuit, relentless and unwavering. "This is Nellis. What's your situation?" the radio operator asked. "We're moving up the mountain on Highway 160, and the bus is about to break down. We need immediate pickup," Martin said. "Stand by," the radio operator said. The radio went silent as Martin struggled to keep the bus moving. He looked up to the other two, speaking matter-of-factly. I need the both of you to get the weapons from the back, and whatever food is left, Martin said. But Martin, Wesley said. Martin cut the young man off, speaking forcefully. This bus isn't going to last much longer. Do it now, Martin said. The two of them nodded, moving to the back of the bus to collect the weapons. As they went, the radio came back on. Team 3, there is no pickup available. Repeat, there is no pickup available. Melvin is on a run to the north and needs to refuel before he can come your way, the radio operator said. How long are we talking? Martin asked. The radio operator fell silent, prompting Martin to raise his voice. Damn it, man. I need to know how long we have to survive out here, Martin said. A couple of hours at a minimum, the radio operator said. Copy that. We're going to be on foot here any minute. I don't know where we're going to be, but it's going to be somewhere near the top of the mountain, Martin said. Stay on radio channel 4, and I will have him call when he gets close, the radio operator said. Thank you, Nellis, Martin said. Martin took the radio from the dash, pocketing it. The others came back up to the front of the bus, carrying 2 bats and a spear, Wesley having the canvas bag of food thrown over his shoulder. The weapons felt inadequate given what was pursuing them, but they were better than nothing. The bus continued to crawl forward, barely keeping pace ahead of the zombie horde. The transmission whined with each rotation of the wheels, the sound growing more desperate with every passing moment. I'm going to push this thing as far as I can, but when I say move, you get out that door and start running as hard as you can. Chapter 3. Wesley was back behind the wheel as Martin paced back and forth, deep in thought. The 3 civilians held their breath as the party bus struggled to keep moving them up the steep incline. The engine whined and knocked, Martin wincing at every sound, the mechanic in him trying to diagnose the problem, even though he couldn't do anything about it. Each noise from the engine told a story Martin didn't want to hear. The transmission was failing, that much was certain. The question was how much longer it would hold together. The grade of the mountain wasn't doing them any favors, putting additional strain on already compromised components. What do we do, man? Wesley asked. We're going to go as far as we can and hope for the best, Martin said. That's not a plan, Wesley said. Martin wanted to respond, but he knew Wesley was right. Hope wasn't a strategy, and they needed something more concrete if they were going to survive the next few hours. As they continued pushing up the hill, Carrie looked ahead, spotting a sign on the side of the road that read, Mountain Springs Next Turn. That's where we can go, Carrie said. What are you talking about? Wesley asked. It's a small town, if you can even call it that. We can hide in there until Melvin can come get us, Carrie said. Are you sure? Wesley asked. Yeah, I was talking to a guy the other day about it. He was pissed he had to leave his home because we were clearing zombies out of the city, Carrie said. Wesley glanced over to Martin, who was contemplating the idea. The mechanic's hands gripped the steering wheel as he weighed their options. They didn't have many. The bus wasn't going to make it much further, and being stranded on an open highway with thousands of zombies bearing down on them wasn't exactly ideal. Finally, he nodded in agreement. Okay, hit the gas as hard as you can and stop when I tell you to, Martin said. Wesley was confused, but did as instructed. He floored the bus, the engine protesting, but picking up speed for a good 20 seconds before the distressing sounds coming from the engine hit a breaking point. The whine became a scream, metal grinding against metal in a way that made Martin's stomach turn. Stop now, Martin said. Wesley slammed on the brakes as Martin reached over and threw the bus into park. The vehicle shuddered to a halt, the engine still running, but barely. He then pulled the door open, motioning for the others. Get out and start running up the hill, Martin said. Carrie and Wesley did as instructed, Martin waiting until they were clear to reach over to the gear shift. He took a beat to steady himself, glancing over to the open door and speaking to himself. Just move fast and you'll be fine, Martin said. Martin let out a grunt as he slipped the bus into neutral, jumping out the door onto the road just as the heavy vehicle began rolling back slightly. He hit the pavement hard, his boots finding purchase on the asphalt. The bus continued its backward momentum, picking up speed as gravity took over. Martin stood tall, watching the van pick up speed as it rolled down the steep incline. It took it a few seconds to reach the front edge of the zombie mob, getting enough velocity to plow right through the horde. The impact was devastating. bodies flying to either side as the bus carved a path through the mass of creatures. "Come on, we have to move," Carrie said. The mechanic watched the bus plow through the zombies for another moment before turning and running to catch up with the others. Despite running over dozens of creatures, the party bus did little to slow them down, their march continuing in pursuit. The horde simply flowed around the obstacle, their focus unwavering. The trio of civilians picked up the pace, their lungs burning as they ascended the steep incline. The exertion paid dividends, however, as they put a good quarter-mile between them and the zombies trailing them. Their legs protested the effort, muscles screaming as they pushed themselves harder than they had in weeks. After another solid minute of running, Carrie and Wesley began slowing down. Their breathing came in ragged gasps, sweat pouring down their faces despite the cool mountain air. "Come on, we have to keep moving," Martin said. "We just have to slow the pace down. I'm not built for this," Carrie said. Martin's first instinct was to keep pushing, but he knew that Carrie was right. Running them into the ground wouldn't help anyone. He nodded, gently grabbing her arm and pulling her along, Wesley following suit. The trio continued walking up the hill at a brisk pace, maintaining their lead over the zombie horde that continued their pursuit. About a quarter-mile up ahead, the road leveled off a bit, curving to the left. The change in grade would make the walking easier, but it also meant the zombies behind them would have an easier time as well. Wesley kept his attention forward, doing his best to ignore the wall of death behind him. As he looked, he saw the road sign pointing to the turnoff to Mountain Springs. The green sign stood out against the brown and gray landscape of the mountain. "We're almost there. I see the marker," Wesley said. The mood of the others brightened up, a small sense of relief washing over them. However, it was short-lived as they got closer to the curve, which revealed a smattering of zombies on the other side, wandering around in the road. The creatures moved without purpose, their dead eyes staring at nothing in particular as they shambled along the highway. Martin stopped dead in his tracks, grabbing the other two. His hand shot out, catching Wesley by the shoulder and pulling him to a halt. "What is it?" Carrie asked. Martin was too terrified to speak up, his gaze straight ahead, which caused Carrie and Wesley to look. The scene ahead of them began to register, the reality of their situation settling in like a weight on their chests. "Jesus Christ," Wesley said. "What do we do?" Carrie asked. Martin glanced back behind them, the horde gaining ground as they remained motionless. The mass of bodies continued their relentless advance, closing the distance with each passing second. They were caught between two groups of zombies, and standing still wasn't an option. "We do the only thing we can do, fight through them and find someplace to lie low," Martin said. Martin gripped his bat a little tighter, giving it a practice vertical swing. The wood felt solid in his hands, the weight of it reassuring. He took a deep, steadying breath before leading the trio forward. Carrie held her spear, hands trembling. The shaft shook slightly as she tried to control her fear. Wesley readied his bat for battle, adjusting the canvas bag of food on his back as they walked. The weight shifted, settling into a more comfortable position. The situation ahead continued to get worse as they approached. The handful of zombies grew into the high dozens. The ghouls weren't just in the road. Several of them were wandering off-road, in the outskirts of the town. The small community of Mountain Springs had been overrun. "When we get to that turn-off road, we push through them and find the first place that looks like we can defend it," Martin said. The other two were too scared to speak, simply following the mechanic as they got close to the road. As soon as one of the ghouls noticed them, Martin broke out into a sprint, leading them off the highway. As soon as Martin's feet hit the side street, the small community began to come into view. Zombies swarmed everywhere, scattered about in packs of 3 to 5, seemingly in every yard. The town was small, maybe a few dozen houses at most, but every single one appeared to have its share of the dead wandering around. Martin locked in on a trio of ghouls just up ahead on the left. He didn't hesitate, running straight for them and swinging his bat with reckless abandon. The barrel connected with the head of the lead creature, crumpling it in an instant. The zombie dropped like a puppet with its strings cut, collapsing to the ground. The mechanic didn't give the others a chance to mount an offensive, swinging his bat again and again, caving in both of their heads. The impacts were solid, the wood connecting with bone and brain matter. The creatures fell one after another, their bodies hitting the dirt. Martin glanced back to the others, who were a few yards behind him and keeping watch on the trailing zombies, which were within 10 yards, far too many of them to deal with in open space. The horde from the highway was closing in, their numbers overwhelming. "Keep moving," Martin said. Martin led the trio through several yards, ignoring the zombies in search of a house. They needed shelter, somewhere they could hold out until Melvin arrived. The zombies in the yards took notice of them, turning to give chase as they ran past. Finally, he spotted one, a single-story brick house sitting in a partially fenced-in lot. The fence ran along the side of the property, cutting across the front but stopping with 10 feet of opening in the driveway. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. Martin ran through the fence, swinging his bat and taking out a straggler as he ran up to the door. The creature went down hard, its skull split open from the force of the blow. He tried the knob, surprised when it opened right up. The door swung inward, revealing a dark interior. Get inside," Martin said. Martin stood on the small front porch, waiting until the other two were inside before joining them. He slammed the door, throwing the deadbolt. The metal slid into place with a satisfying click, the sound of security in an insecure world. "This place should be empty, but check it out," Martin said. "What are you going to do?" Wesley asked. The mechanic looked through the front window at the dozens of zombies shambling towards them. The creatures were converging on the house, drawn by the noise and movement. They had maybe a minute before the first of them reached the door. "I'm going to figure out how we're going to survive this." Chapter 4. Martin stared out the front window of the house as the others ran through it, making sure there weren't any straggler zombies inside. The spread-out smattering of ghouls were converging into one single horde, all of them headed straight towards the opening in the fence. The sight was mesmerizing in the worst possible way. What had been isolated creatures wandering aimlessly through yards and along the street were now moving with singular purpose. They shuffled forward, their arms outstretched, their dead eyes fixed on the house. The gap in the fence might as well have been a welcome sign, beckoning them forward. "Think, man, think," Martin said. The mechanic continued in his attempt to come up with a viable plan, but nothing was coming to mind. Every option he considered fell apart under scrutiny. They couldn't fight that many zombies in open combat. They couldn't outrun them with the horde from the highway still closing in. And this house wasn't going to hold against that kind of pressure. He flinched as the other two came running into the front room, their footsteps loud on the hardwood floor. "We're the only ones here," Carrie said. "Not for long we're not," Martin said. Martin pointed out the front window, prompting the other two to look. Both of them muttered curses under their breath at what they saw, the front edge of the converging horde pushing through the opening in the fence. The creatures stumbled over each other in their eagerness to reach the house, creating a bottleneck at the gap. But it wouldn't last long. There were too many of them, and they were too close. "So what do we do?" Carrie asked. Carrie reached out to the door, giving it a knock, revealing that it was made from cheap material. The hollow sound echoed through the entryway, the kind of door that was meant to keep out the elements, not an invasion of the dead. "Because I don't think that door is going to hold for very long," Carrie said. Martin looked around the living room, his eyes scanning for anything they could use. The space was modestly furnished, a couch against the far wall, a coffee table, a television stand. Nothing special, but functional. He pointed to the couch on the far wall. "Wesley, help me with this," Martin said. The younger man nodded, grabbing one end of the sofa as the duo moved it over to the door. The furniture was heavier than it looked, stuffed with dense cushions and a solid frame. They positioned it against the door, wedging it in place. It wasn't much additional protection, but it was better than nothing. At the very least, it would slow them down. Carrie began to speak up, not thrilled with the plan, but was interrupted by the sound of hands on the front door. The banging picked up quickly, the sounds of moans joining quickly, filling the house with sound, and filling those within with a sense of dread. The noise was overwhelming, dozens of hands slapping against wood, scraping against the surface. The moans came from everywhere at once, a chorus of the dead demanding entry. The house itself seemed to vibrate with the assault. Within moments of the zombies banging on the door, visible cracks could be seen forming on the cheap wood. Splinters began to appear along the frame, the material buckling under the sustained pressure. The door wasn't designed for this kind of abuse, and it was failing fast. "We can't stay here," Carrie said. Wesley thought about it for a moment before running to the back door. His shoes squeaked on the linoleum as he crossed through the kitchen. He looked out through the window, spotting a dozen zombies that were slowly walking towards the house, but were still somewhat spread out. They hadn't converged yet, hadn't formed the kind of mass that was hammering at the front of the house. "If we can't stay here, then we move to another house," Wesley called out. Wesley yelled to the front room, getting the others to come to the back of the house. He pointed to the backyard, showing what he saw. Martin and Carrie moved quickly, leaving their position at the front to assess the new option. The zombies were spread out, but the nearest house was 40 yards away, and they could see more zombies roaming around, not yet drawn to the noise. The backyard itself was relatively clear, just patchy grass and a few scraggly bushes. Beyond that, more houses stretched out, each one a potential refuge or a potential death trap. "It's a better plan than staying here. What do you think, Martin?" Carrie asked. The mechanic hesitated, running through the plan in his mind. 40 yards of open ground, a dozen zombies to deal with, maybe more once they started moving, and no guarantee the next house would be any better than this one. But the alternative was staying here and getting torn apart when the front door gave way. He remained silent for several long seconds, weighing the odds. Carrie grabbed him, raising her voice a bit as she spoke. "Martin, we can't stay here," Carrie said. As if to emphasize her point, the noise coming from the front door cracking intensified. Part of the wooden top broke off, clattering to the ground after bouncing off the couch. Fingers pushed through the gap, grasping at air. More wood splintered, the hole growing larger with each passing second. "We're going to have to put some of those things down if we're going to stay hidden," Martin said. Carrie nodded, raising her spear up to show that she was ready. The weapon trembled slightly in her hands, but her grip was firm. As Martin reached down for the doorknob, Wesley spoke up, stopping him. "Hang on a second," Wesley said. "Come on, Wesley, we don't have time," Carrie said. "Just hang on a second," Wesley said. The young man rushed over to the kitchen, which was just a few steps away from the back door. The small space was cluttered with the remnants of someone's abandoned life. Dishes still sat in the drying rack. A calendar hung on the wall, frozen on a date from weeks ago. He pulled open drawers, shoving them closed when they revealed silverware, towels, and cooking utensils. The contents rattled with each slam, the sound adding to the chaos. On his fourth pull, however, a grin spread across his face as he rummaged around for a moment. His hand emerged holding something small. "What the hell are you doing, man?" Martin asked. Wesley pulled out a book of matches, holding them up for a moment, which did nothing but serve to confuse the others more. The small cardboard book looked unremarkable, the kind you'd get from a restaurant or bar. "It can't hurt to take a few of those things out, can it?" Wesley asked. Martin and Carrie exchanged a glance, shrugging, which was all the young man needed to see. He quickly struck a match, lighting it up as he put it to the base of the curtains in the kitchen. The flame caught immediately, the fabric old and dry. In a flash, the flame spread, quickly engulfing the curtains and catching the wooden frame of the window on fire. The fire climbed with startling speed, fueled by the synthetic material and the dry wood. Smoke began to fill the kitchen, the acrid smell sharp in their nostrils. Wesley rushed over to the others as Martin pulled open the door, the gust of wind hitting the flames, causing them to spread further. The backdraft fed the fire, making it roar to life with renewed intensity. Martin honed in on the closest zombie, rushing up and swinging his bat hard, caving in the skull and dropping it. The creature crumpled without ceremony, its body hitting the ground in a heap. Carrie was close behind, using her spear to strike down the next closest ghoul. She drove the point into its eye socket, the blade penetrating deep into the brain. The zombie went limp, sliding off the weapon as she pulled it free. The mechanic rushed by Carrie to deliver another strike, taking down the last creature in that small group. 3 zombies down in quick succession, but more were coming. The movement and noise had drawn their attention, and they were closing in from multiple directions. The trio ran 30 yards across mostly open space, pausing to take down a couple packs of creatures as they went, doing their best to make sure that they weren't followed. Each engagement was brief but brutal, bats and spear finding their marks with efficiency born of desperation. They glanced back to the house they had escaped from, the fire fully engulfing the back half of it, sending black smoke into the air. Orange flames licked out of the broken windows, the structure already becoming an inferno. The zombies at the front of the house continued their assault, oblivious to the fire consuming the building. "Come on, let's get inside," Martin said. The others followed Martin as he rushed up to another foursome of zombies, the trio making quick work of them with their melee weapons. Martin's bat connected with skull after skull, each impact solid and final. Wesley flanked from the side, his own bat swinging in wide arcs. Carrie provided support with her spear, jabbing at any creature that got too close. The mechanic pointed to a house 20 yards away that had a few zombies roaming around the yard, the back of the structure facing them. The building looked similar to the first one they'd taken shelter in, single story and modest. "That one. Wesley, you take care of the door. We'll take out the stragglers," Martin said. The young man nodded as he followed the other two towards the house. As Martin and Carrie broke off to deal with the nearby zombies, Wesley ran up to the back door of the house, reaching down and trying the knob, finding it locked. His hand twisted the metal, but it refused to turn. "Oh, come on," Wesley said. Wesley looked at the door, taking quick notice of the small glass panels around it, a curtain on the other side blocking any view. The decorative windows were within easy reach, and they represented his only option. He reacted on instinct, using the barrel of his bat to break out the glass. The sound of shattering filled the air, shards falling both inside and outside the door. He ran the bat along the frame to clear out the remaining jagged bits, making sure he wouldn't cut himself. Wesley reached inside to unlatch the lock, his arm extending through the broken window. However, as his hand grasped the deadbolt, he felt a pair of cold hands gripping onto his arm. The touch was ice cold, the fingers strong and unyielding. "Oh God," Wesley said. Wesley tried to yank his arm free, but the grip on the other side was too strong. The creature had latched on with both hands, its strength inhuman. The young man was pulled into the door as the creature on the other side yanked the meal to its mouth. Wesley's shoulders slammed against the wood, his face pressed against the frame. An instant later, a white-hot pain shot through Wesley's arm as a chunk of flesh was ripped out. The zombie's teeth tore into muscle and skin, removing a piece the size of a golf ball. He let out a pain scream as he continued to struggle, trying to break free. Blood poured from the wound, running down his arm and dripping onto the ground. Martin dispatched the last zombie in the yard before realizing what was happening. He turned at the sound of Wesley's scream, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. The mechanic rushed over to the door, using his free hand to grab the knob and turn it while planting his shoulder into the door. The door flew open, hitting the zombie in the face, knocking it back and breaking its grip on Wesley. The creature stumbled backward, its jaw still working as it tried to bite air. It collapsed to the ground, making it easy work for Martin. The mechanic brought his bat down hard, ending the threat. Carrie rushed over to Wesley, who was trying and failing to keep it together on the ground, his hand gripping the gruesome bite wound on his arm. Blood seeped between his fingers, the injury severe. His face had gone pale, shock beginning to set in. "Oh no, Wesley," Carrie said. Carrie trailed off as she reached down to try and comfort the young man. Wesley smacked her arm away, panic beginning to set in. His breathing came in rapid gasps, his eyes wide with terror. Martin pulled the door wide open, looking out at the path they carved, spotting no zombies. The immediate area was clear, but that wouldn't last. More creatures would be drawn to the noise soon enough. He looked down to the injured man, grabbing him by the arm and yanking him inside. "What are you doing?" Carrie asked. "We have to get hidden while we have the chance," Martin said. Carrie nodded, helping Wesley inside, Martin shutting the door after they crossed into the kitchen. The mechanic and waitress looked down at Wesley, who was having a full-blown panic attack as he held his injured arm. His whole body shook, his breathing erratic. "I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die." Chapter 5. Martin stood by the back door of the house, looking out through the pulled curtain, making sure that nothing was coming their way. The fabric was thin and faded, allowing him to see the backyard without exposing himself to view. The scene outside was still for the moment, just a few scattered zombies wandering aimlessly through neighboring yards. As he kept watch, Carrie pulled open drawers in the kitchen, finally finding a towel which she wrapped around Wesley's injured arm. The drawer slammed shut with more force than she intended, the sound making everyone tense for a moment. But no response came from outside. "Keep pressure on it. That should stop the bleeding," Carrie said. Wesley was calming down a bit, however. He was still having major issues with his current situation. His breathing had steadied somewhat, but his eyes remained wide, the reality of what had happened still crashing over him in waves. The bite was a death sentence, and they all knew it. "What's the point? I'm dead," Wesley said. "You're going to be dead a lot sooner if you don't stop that bleeding," Carrie said. Carrie's tone carried a hint of pleading. She knew there was nothing that could be done to change his fate, but somehow, treating it like a normal injury was comforting to her, helping to keep her sanity. If she could focus on the immediate problem, she didn't have to think about what came after. Wesley could see and hear that concern coming from her, so he took a deep breath to steady himself before complying. He pressed down hard on the towel, which quickly became red as the blood soaked through. "Oh, let me get another one for you," Carrie said. "Thank you, Carrie," Wesley said. The waitress got up from beside Wesley, wandering back into the kitchen and grabbing another couple of dish towels from the drawer. She selected ones that looked thick and absorbent, the kind meant for heavy-duty use. As she walked back over to him, everybody froze when they heard the sound of banging coming from the back of the house. The noise was distinct, rhythmic impacts against wood. Not the random shambling of a zombie outside, but something deliberate, something trapped. Martin stepped up, readying his bat and motioning for the others to stay put. He gripped the wood tightly, his knuckles white from the pressure. "Carrie, get that bleeding stopped. I'll take care of this," Martin said. Carrie didn't speak, only nodded to the mechanic as he moved towards the source of the noise, which took him to the hallway. The banging intensified as his footsteps caused the floorboards to creak. Each step he took seemed to trigger a more violent response from whatever was making the noise. The hallway was narrow and dark, lined with family photos that hung crooked on the walls. Martin couldn't help but notice them as he passed, frozen moments of a life that no longer existed. Birthdays, holidays, graduations, all of it ended now. Martin studied the scene for a moment, realizing that it was coming from the back bedroom, the cheaply made door partially broken from the impacts coming from the inside. The wood around the frame had already begun to splinter, cracks spreading like spider webs across the surface. As he got halfway down the hall, an arm punched through the door, causing it to be trapped, flailing. The limb was pale and bloodless, the skin mottled with decay. The fingers grasped at nothing, searching blindly for prey. The zombie on the other side had found a weak point in the door and exploited it, driven by instinct. Martin knew this was his chance, so he rushed forward and delivered a forceful kick to the door right at the knob. The wooden frame splintered from the impact as the door flew open, slamming into the face of the zombie trapped in it. The creature stumbled backward, its arm finally freed from the hole it had created. Martin rushed through, spotting a zombie across the room that was struggling to walk with a badly mangled leg. The limb was twisted at an unnatural angle, the result of the attack that had ended its life. The creature dragged itself forward, undeterred by the injury. The mechanic made quick work of it with a vicious swing of the bat, the impact solid and final, before turning and dealing with the zombie underneath the door. The second creature was already trying to right itself, pushing up from the floor where it had fallen. Martin didn't give it the chance. He brought the bat down hard, ending the threat with a single blow. He stood there, silent, for several moments, listening intently for any signs of other creatures. The house creaked around him, settling into its foundation. But no other sounds emerged, no more banging, no more moaning. Once he determined he was alone, he relaxed, making his way back into the kitchen. As he got back to the others, he saw that Carrie had managed to get Wesley into a chair, his arm resting on the table as she used some tape to secure a towel to his arm, as best she could. The makeshift bandage wasn't pretty, but it was functional. The bleeding had slowed considerably, the pressure and wrapping doing their job. "Okay, we're alone in here now," Martin said. "What are we going to do?" Carrie asked. Martin walked over to the window, pulling back the curtain ever so slightly to look outside at the path they came from. There were a handful of zombies shambling about, none of them headed towards them, seemingly unaware of their presence. The fire at the first house had died down somewhat, still burning, but no longer the raging inferno it had been. Black smoke continued to rise into the sky, a beacon visible for miles. "It doesn't look like we were followed, so we have some time to figure that out," Martin said. Martin pulled the radio from his vest, clicking it on. The device crackled to life, static filling the air before he pressed the transmit button. "Come in, Nellis. This is Team 3. Do you read me?" Martin asked. There was a moment of silence, followed by a static-filled response. The connection was weak, the distance and interference making communication difficult. "This is Nellis. What's your situation?" the radio operator asked. Martin thought about it for a moment before responding, looking over to Wesley. He knew that if he told Nellis about the bite that they may not come, not wanting to risk an infected person being on base. The protocol was clear, even if it was never spoken aloud. Anyone bitten was dead, and the dead didn't get rescue flights. He made eye contact with Wesley, who knew that as well. "It's okay, you don't have to tell them about me. I know I'm not going anywhere," Wesley said. Carrie's eyes welled up, hearing the words spoken aloud hitting her. The finality of it was crushing. Martin nodded at Wesley before clicking the radio back on. "There's 2 of us left in need of pickup. We're in a house in Mountain Springs," Martin said. "Copy that. Stand by," the radio operator said. "We're not going anywhere," Martin said. Martin spoke out of frustration, shaking his head as he lowered the radio while waiting on a response. The group just stood there in stunned silence for what seemed like an eternity before the radio crackled back to life. The wait stretched on, each second feeling like a minute. "Team 3, I've been told that there is a mechanical issue with the helicopter that is being dealt with. Transport should be on your position in 60 minutes, however," the radio operator said. "Great. So how do you want us to signal Melvin?" Martin asked. "Please be advised that the pilot will not be landing inside the town. You will need to make a rendezvous point for pickup," the radio operator said. "Well, how in the hell do you propose we do that? Because I don't think there's a car left in this town since everybody drove out of here when we evacuated the place. We're on foot, and those things are everywhere, so we're not going to be able to get far," Martin said. The frustration in his voice was clear. The situation was bad enough without adding a cross-country hike through zombie-infested territory. Carrie and Wesley exchanged worried glances, both of them processing what this new complication meant. "Understood, Team 3. You do not have to get to the original rendezvous point. There is a clearing to the northwest, half a mile away from the edge of town. That is your new rendezvous point," the radio operator said. Martin looked over to Carrie, who shrugged and gave a half-hearted nod. Half a mile didn't sound like much, but in their current situation, it might as well have been 10. They'd have to fight their way through the town, avoid the main horde, and reach the clearing before the helicopter arrived. "All right, we'll be there in 60. Just make sure that Melvin is there," Martin said. "Copy that, Team 3. Safe travels," the radio operator said. The radio went dead, Martin clipping it back to his belt before looking over to the others. The weight of what they had to do settled over them like a blanket. 60 minutes to cross half a mile through hostile territory. It was doable, but just barely. "That's going to be a hell of a run if those things are swarming the town," Carrie said. "We can get through them," Martin said. Carrie nodded before turning to Wesley, concern growing on her face. The young man looked pale, whether from blood loss or shock, or the early stages of infection, she couldn't tell, but he was in bad shape. "Wesley, do you think you can run?" Carrie asked. "They're never going to take me with you. As soon as they see the bite, they're going to put a bullet in my head," Wesley said. "You don't know that," Carrie said. "Yeah, I do. They're not going to risk me being on base, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't let me on base either," Wesley said. Carrie began welling up again, prompting Wesley to grab her hand, gripping it tight in an attempt to comfort her. The gesture was simple but meaningful, a connection between 2 people facing an impossible situation. After a long beat, Martin spoke up. "It's your party, man. How do you want to spend it?" Martin asked. Wesley thought about it for a moment, pushing out all of the self-pity before sitting up straight and speaking with conviction. His voice was steady, the fear replaced by determination. If he was going to die, he was going to do it on his own terms. "I'm going to help the 2 of you get home." Chapter 6. Martin and Carrie stared at Wesley for a moment, emotions getting the better of them as they processed his offer to essentially sacrifice himself so they could escape. The weight of what he was proposing hung in the air like a physical thing, pressing down on all of them. "Wesley, you don't have," Carrie said. Wesley held up his injured arm, getting Carrie to stop talking. The makeshift bandage was already showing signs of blood seeping through, the red stain spreading across the white fabric. His message was clear without words. "You said it was my party. Well, this is how I'm going to spend it," Wesley said. Carrie's head dropped as Wesley got up from the table, walking into the kitchen, yanking open drawers in frustration. He was doing his best to keep it together, but it was difficult. The reality of what he was about to do was crashing down on him, and he needed to focus on action before fear could take hold. After a couple of drawer openings, he found what he was looking for: the knives. The blades gleamed in the kitchen light, a collection of various sizes and purposes. He reached in and grabbed a handful, dropping them onto the counter. The metal clattered against the surface, the sound sharp and final. "Bag! I need a bag," Wesley said. Wesley continued opening cabinets and drawers, grabbing things from inside and throwing them across the room. A can opener hit the floor, dish towels scattered, a set of measuring cups bounced off the wall. He muttered curses to himself, the frustration building until it broke as he found what he was looking for. Wesley pulled out a handful of reusable shopping bags, the cloth kind. They were the sturdy type, meant for carrying groceries, but they'd serve a different purpose now. He grabbed the knives off of the counter, dropping them inside before slinging the bag over his shoulder. The weight of the blades pulled at his shoulder, but he adjusted the strap and kept moving. The young man marched over to the back door, grabbing his bat along the way, pausing as he got to it. Emotions began to get the better of him, so he couldn't bring himself to turn around to face his friends. If he looked at them, if he saw their faces, he might not be able to go through with it. "Give me 10 minutes, then make your move," Wesley said. "Wesley!" Carrie said. Carrie trailed off, not sure of what to say, even though she knew she needed to say something. The words wouldn't come, stuck somewhere between her heart and her throat. After a long pause, Martin spoke up to fill the void. "Thank you," Martin said. "Just make sure you finish the job," Wesley said. "We will, man," Martin said. Wesley nodded, still not able to look at either of them. His hand gripped the doorknob, the metal cool against his palm. He pulled the door open and burst into the backyard, the sounds of zombie moaning hitting his ears quickly. The noise was overwhelming after the relative quiet of the house. Moans and shuffling feet filled the air, coming from closer than he would have liked. Wesley looked to the right, spotting a lone zombie shambling towards him just a few yards away. The creature was mostly intact, only a single bite wound on its neck, its movements still somewhat coordinated. The young man lifted his bat up as he marched over to it. In an instant, he unleashed his fury upon it. All the fear, all the anger, all the injustice of what had happened to him poured out through the weapon. The first strike cracked the skull, sending the ghoul to the ground. The zombie collapsed, its legs giving out as the bat made contact. But that wasn't enough for Wesley. He continued bringing down blow after blow, completely obliterating the head of the creature. Bones splintered. Brain matter spread across the grass. The face became unrecognizable. After the 7th blow, he finally stopped, letting out a frustrated scream in its direction. The sound was raw and primal. Everything he'd been holding back, released in a single moment. The noise was more than enough to draw the attention of more zombies nearby, all of whom locked onto him, shambling in his direction. Their dead eyes found him, their arms extending toward the source of the sound. "Yeah, that's right, assholes. One of your buddies took a chunk out of me, and you're all gonna pay for it," Wesley said. Wesley's arm burned from the exertion, but that didn't slow him down. The bite wound throbbed with each movement, but he pushed the pain aside. The young man picked his next target, 2 zombies 10 yards away. They moved together, shoulder to shoulder as they approached. He marched over to them, swinging hard, taking one down before focusing on the other. The first creature dropped. Skull caved in. The next ghoul managed to close the gap quicker than Wesley expected, forcing him to drop the bat and reach into the bag of blades. His hand quickly found a handle, yanking a knife free and immediately shoving it into the face of the creature. The blade sank deep, penetrating through the eye socket. Wesley used his offhand to grab the zombie by the shirt, holding it up as he struck it again and again. Blood splattered onto his face as the knife drove into the skull of the creature multiple times. The warm liquid ran down his cheeks, mixing with sweat. He kept the assault going until the zombie went limp, slipping out of his grasp. The body hit the ground with a heavy thud. Wesley let out another primal scream, fully embracing the rage. He looked around, spotting a couple dozen zombies coming at him from multiple directions. They were converging, drawn by the noise and violence. The net was closing. "Yeah, come on, come and get me," Wesley said. Wesley started marching across the neighborhood, screaming the entire way to make sure the zombies stayed focused on him. His voice echoed between the houses, a constant beacon for the dead to follow. He swung his bat in a more controlled manner as he moved, taking down a few creatures as he went. Each strike was measured now, conserving energy for what was to come. He moved through yards and over fences, the bag of knives bouncing against his side with each step. The zombies followed, more joining the group with each block he covered. The horde was growing, swelling as stragglers from all directions joined the pursuit. After a few minutes of walking, he spotted a 2-story house on the next block. The structure was larger than most of the others, with a wide front porch and intact windows. He turned around and noticed that 100 zombies were now following him. The mass of bodies stretched out behind him like a wave. "That's going to have to do," Wesley said. Wesley turned back to the horde, letting out a 2-finger whistle, wanting to make sure they kept their focus on him. The sharp sound cut through the air, heads turning in response. He kept moving towards the house, getting to the door and kicking it open. The door flew inward, slamming against the wall with a bang. As the door flew open, he was immediately greeted by a zombie inside. The creature lunged forward, arms outstretched. Wesley used the tip of his bat to shove the ghoul back by the chest, giving him enough room to deliver a forceful strike to the head, putting it down. The zombie crumpled, sliding down the wall to the floor. Wesley looked around the house, noticing that the lights were still on. He moved into the front room, spotting a stereo system sitting on the shelf. The equipment looked expensive, well maintained. "Let's hope you had good taste in music," Wesley said. Wesley marched over to it, powering it on as he scanned the shelf filled with CDs. The collection was extensive, organized alphabetically in a rack beside the stereo. It took a moment of looking before he found one he liked, a rock album. The cover art showed a band in their prime, frozen in a moment that no longer mattered. "I can think of worse songs to die to," Wesley said. Wesley popped the disc into the tray, hitting play and turning it up as loud as it would go. A few seconds later, the opening strums of a rock song kicked up, the young man bobbing his head to the rhythm. The music filled the house, pumping through speakers that rattled with the volume. Wesley walked back to the front door of the house, looking out into the yard where the horde was closing the gap, only about 10 yards away. The zombies shambled forward, drawn by the music like moths to a flame. Their moans mixed with the rock anthem, creating a surreal soundtrack. "All right, who wants a piece of me?" Wesley asked. Wesley retreated down the hallway straight across from the door, which led to the stairs up to the second floor. The passage was narrow, perfect for funneling the zombies into a single file. He took a few steps up before positioning the bag of knives in a way that it allowed for easy access. The strap hung over the railing, the blades within easy reach. Wesley readied his bat, giving it a few vertical practice swings, wincing in pain as the wound on his arm didn't appreciate the exertion. Fresh blood seeped through the bandage, but it didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except making sure Martin and Carrie got out. He put it out of his mind, ready to dish out some revenge against the creatures that stole his life away. His grip tightened on the bat, knuckles white from the pressure. A few moments later, the front edge of the horde shambled into the house, drawn by the music that was pumping through the speakers. They filled the doorway, pushing against each other in their eagerness to get inside. Wesley waited until they were within range before beginning his assault. He let out a warrior's scream as he caved in the head of the lead ghoul. The bat connected with a satisfying crack, skull fragmenting under the impact. Before it hit the ground, he already had the bat above his head, delivering another killing blow. The second zombie fell on top of the first, bodies beginning to pile up. Wesley continued delivering killing blows, the bodies piling up at the base of the stairs. The corpses created an obstacle, forcing the zombies behind to climb over their fallen companions. Rather than retreat up to the second floor, he continued his assault. 2 more ghouls fell before his aim faltered. Instead of striking the head, the bat made contact with the zombie's shoulder, causing Wesley to go off balance. The zombie stumbled but didn't fall, and the missed strike threw Wesley's timing off. He was forced to let go of the bat and grab onto the handrail to avoid falling to the ground. One creature reached out, grasping his arm and pulling him towards the horde. Wesley reached into his bag, pulling a knife free just before he lost his balance completely, raising the blade up and driving it into the face of the zombie that was pulling him. The creature's grip loosened as the knife penetrated its brain. Wesley hit the ground hard, joining the ghoul with the blade in its eye. His back slammed against the stairs, knocking the wind out of him. In an instant, he felt several sets of hands grabbing at him. Cold fingers dug into his clothes, his skin, pulling him in different directions. A moment later, he felt that sharp, burning pain of teeth ripping flesh from bone. He let out a pain scream as he pulled another knife from his bag, slashing it wildly at the zombies that were moving in for the kill. The blade cut through dead flesh, opening wounds that caused them no pain. But it didn't stop them. Nothing could stop them now. Wesley continued stabbing until his final breath, taking down 2 more creatures before he lost the ability to attack. His arm grew heavy, the knife falling from his grip. The fallen zombies rested on top of him as the others feasted on him. He looked up to the ceiling, thinking of his friends one last time before the darkness overtook him. Chapter 7. 30 minutes had passed since Wesley began his final charge. Martin and Carrie could hear the faint sounds of rock music playing in the distance. The melody was distorted by distance and wind, but recognizable enough to know it was working. Wesley was still out there, still drawing the zombies away. Martin stood beside the back door, looking out through the crack between the curtains and the frame, watching as another few zombies shambled past, drawn to the music. The creatures moved with singular purpose, their dead eyes fixed in the direction of the sound. They ignored everything else, pulled along by the promise of prey. "Jesus, they're still coming," Martin said. Martin looked back over to Carrie, who was sitting at the table, trying her best not to cry, even though an occasional tear would roll down her cheek. She stared at nothing in particular, her hands folded in front of her, the weight of what had happened pressing down on her shoulders. "I can't believe he's gone. He was here, and then," Carrie said. Carrie rubbed her eyes as more tears began to flow. The grief was overwhelming, threatening to consume her completely. Martin broke away from the door, taking a knee beside her. He took her hand into his, getting her to look at him. Her eyes were red and puffy, the pain clear on her face. "I know it's hard, but we don't have time to mourn him right now," Martin said. Carrie took a deep breath to get back into the moment, forcing herself to push the emotion back down. It took a few seconds, but it worked. She squared her shoulders, wiping at her face with her free hand. "Okay, I'm good," Carrie said. She wiped away one final tear, nodding at her partner, who was looking at her skeptically. He knew she wasn't really good, that nobody could be good after what they'd just been through. But he also knew they needed to function, and sometimes functioning meant lying to yourself. "I said I'm good," Carrie said. "Okay, I believe you," Martin said. Martin got back up, glancing at his watch, which was a little more than halfway through his hour timer. The hands seemed to be moving faster than normal, time slipping away from them. They had maybe 25 minutes left before the helicopter arrived, and they still had to reach the clearing. "We're going to have to move soon," Martin said. "Is it clear out there?" Carrie asked. Martin looked through the curtain again, shaking his head as he spotted 4 more zombies in the yard. The creatures were spread out, but moving in a general pattern that would eventually bring them close to the house. It was only a matter of time before one of them noticed something and brought the rest. "It's as clear as it's going to get. We're going to have to fight," Martin said. Carrie nodded as she pulled herself up from the table, grabbing her spear from the corner where it had been resting. The weapon felt heavier than before, the weight of responsibility adding to its physical mass. Martin grabbed his bat before returning to the door. "You just tell me what to do, and I'll do it," Carrie said. Martin could hear the defeated tone in her voice. She was going through the motions, doing what needed to be done, but the spark was gone. He knew if they were going to get through this that he was going to have to be the strong one. He gave her a confident nod, projecting a certainty he didn't entirely feel. "Just follow me and I'll get us there," Martin said. Carrie let out a half-hearted nod, doing her best, but Martin wasn't sure if it was going to be good enough. Regardless, it was time to find out. They couldn't wait any longer. Martin reached down, grabbing the doorknob and giving it a turn. With a pull, they were moving outside. The mechanic locked onto the nearest zombie, rushing up and swinging his bat hard. The barrel hit the creature squarely in the face. The sound of bones shattering on impact filled the air, sending the ghoul to the ground. The zombie's skull caved in from the force, brain matter spraying outward. It dropped without ceremony, collapsing into a heap. The noise was enough to draw the attention of a handful of other nearby zombies, all of whom let out excited moans at the sight of fresh meat. Their heads turned in unison, dead eyes focusing on the two living people. Rather than engage, Martin picked up the pace, running to the north. The duo rushed through the yards of several houses as zombies shambled all around them. Most of them were scattered around, but some were beginning to cluster in larger groups. The music in the distance had drawn the majority away, but plenty remained, wandering the streets and yards of Mountain Springs. They vaulted over a low fence, Martin landing smoothly while Carrie stumbled slightly before catching herself. The terrain was uneven, rocks and debris scattered across the properties. Every step had to be calculated. One wrong move could mean a twisted ankle and certain death. They reached the next street, stopping in the middle of it for a moment to catch their breath. They looked down either direction, spotting dozens of them to their left and right. However, they were still 20 yards away. The zombies had noticed them, beginning to converge from both directions. The gap was closing. "How much further is it?" Carrie asked. Martin shook his head. "I don't know, but we have to keep moving," Martin said. Martin grabbed onto Carrie's hand, pulling her along. They ran up to the next house, half a dozen creatures shambling out from behind it. The mob blocked their path forward, filling the space between the house and outbuilding. The zombies moved as a group, their arms outstretched, mouths hanging open. Rather than push through them, the duo stopped, readying themselves for a fight. Both of them were winded from running, and striking them down gave them a chance for a breather. Their lungs burned, sweat pouring down their faces despite the cool air. "Just a few quick stabs and we'll be through them," Martin said. Carrie nodded, readying herself for the fight. However, before they could engage them, they heard the unmistakable sound of a helicopter. The rhythmic thump of rotor blades cut through the air, getting louder with each passing second. Martin glanced down at his watch, seeing that there was still 20 minutes on the timer. His stomach dropped. They weren't ready. They weren't in position. "Damn it, they're early," Martin said. Carrie's eyes went wide, knowing that they were still not to the rendezvous point. If they missed the helicopter, there wouldn't be another chance. Melvin couldn't hang around indefinitely, not with thousands of zombies in the area. Martin glanced back at the mob before looking over to his partner's weapon. In an instant, he yanked it from her hands, giving her the bat. The exchange happened so quickly that Carrie barely had time to register what was happening. He didn't explain anything, instead, turning and running as hard as he could towards the group of zombies blocking their path. He turned the spear horizontally, keeping it pressed against his chest as he approached the ghouls. The wooden shaft extended out on either side of him, like a battering ram. As he reached them, he extended his arms, planting the wooden spear into the chest of 3 creatures. The impact was solid, the spear driving into dead flesh with force. He had just enough momentum to drive them back, sending them to the ground and clearing a path through. The zombies toppled like bowling pins, their bodies hitting the dirt in a tangle of limbs. Carrie picked up the pace, jumping over the fallen zombies as Martin pressed forward. She felt one of them hit her shoes with its fingertips, but it wasn't enough to trip her up. The creature's fingers brushed her heel, missing by inches. She didn't look back, focusing only on Martin's back ahead of her. The two of them kept running, spotting a tree line up ahead, the sound of the helicopter nearly directly overhead of them. The aircraft was close, maybe already descending toward the landing zone. They had to move faster. We're almost there, Martin said. The two of them reached the trees, which were thick, forcing them to slow down. Branches whipped at their faces and arms, the undergrowth grabbing at their legs. They pushed through the brush, which went on for 20 yards before they emerged on the other side. The helicopter sound was now coming from ahead of them, clearly getting lower to the ground. The duo stopped at the edge of the trees, spotting 100 zombies scattered out in the landing zone. The ghouls were spaced out a bit, but it wouldn't take long for them to converge on their position. The clearing was larger than Martin had expected, maybe 200 yards across, and every inch of it seemed to have zombies wandering through. They looked up, spotting the helicopter hovering 50 yards above the ground. The aircraft held position, the pilot clearly assessing the situation before committing to a landing. The duo waved to them, frantically trying to get their attention, arms waving overhead, desperate signals in the fading light. A moment later, Martin's radio crackled to life. "When we touch down, you run as hard as you can in a straight line to us," Melvin said. "What about those things?" Martin asked. "Just do what I say and you'll be okay," Melvin said. Martin thought about it for a moment before responding. He looked at the mass of zombies between them and where the helicopter would land. It seemed impossible, but they didn't have another option. "All right, I trust you," Martin said. The duo watched as the helicopter lowered to the ground, landing in an empty spot with the bulk of the zombies in between the vehicle and them. The skids touched down, the aircraft settling onto the dirt. As soon as they were on the ground, Martin grabbed onto Carrie's hand and pulled her along. "Let's go," Martin said. They pumped their legs hard, staying in a straight line as they ran. The duo flinched as they heard gunshots popping off from ahead. The sharp cracks of rifle fire cut through the air, rapid and controlled. A moment later, they noticed zombies in their path, a head beginning to fall to the ground, their heads exploding. Brain matter and skull fragments flew in all directions as the soldiers found their marks. Martin kept his focus ahead, making sure that their path stayed straight, trusting the soldiers to protect them. He didn't look at the zombies falling around them, didn't think about how close the creatures were getting. He just ran, pulling Carrie along with him. As they got within 20 yards, they saw two soldiers by the side of the helicopter, firing as quickly as they got their targets in sight. The men moved with efficiency, acquiring targets and dropping them in smooth succession. Their weapons barked repeatedly, each shot finding its mark. Private Thomas waved the duo into the helicopter, he and Private Parker joining them inside the vehicle shortly thereafter. Martin practically threw Carrie into the cabin before climbing in himself, collapsing onto the deck. "We're in, go, go, go," Thomas said. A second later, Melvin had them airborne. The helicopter lifted off smoothly, climbing rapidly away from the clearing. The two civilians breathed a sigh of relief as they knew they were finally safe. The ground fell away beneath them, the zombies shrinking to dots as they gained altitude. Martin reached over, giving Carrie a squeeze on the shoulder and a nod. They knew they were lucky to be alive. Wesley's sacrifice had bought them the time they needed. Without him, they'd both be dead. Chapter 8. Several hours later, Carrie sat alone at a mess hall table, staring at the food in front of her. Her stomach rumbled, and she knew that she had to eat, but after what transpired today, she just couldn't bring herself to eat. The bowl of soup sat there, mocking her with its normalcy. How could she eat when Wesley was gone? How could anything be normal again? She reached down, forcing herself to put her spoon into the bowl of soup, steam rising off of it as she pulled it towards her mouth. The liquid was hot, the smell of vegetables and broth filling her nostrils. A moment later, her hand trembled as the emotions began to overwhelm her, dropping the soup back into the dish it came from. The spoon clattered against the ceramic, soup splashing over the rim. She planted both elbows onto the table, rubbing her eyes in an attempt to get the crying to stop. Her shoulders shook as she tried to hold it together, but the tears came anyway. Silent and unwanted, they rolled down her cheeks and dripped onto the table. A moment later, Martin's voice drew her attention. "You know, that soup is good for keeping your energy up, so if you eat you'll be able to cry more," Martin said. Carrie let out a snort laugh, inadvertent as the absurdity of Martin's statement caught her off guard. The sound surprised her, cutting through the grief for just a moment. She immediately felt guilty for laughing, which only served to get her to laugh more. The emotional whiplash was disorienting, tears mixing with laughter in a way that felt both wrong and necessary. "Oh, you were so bad," Carrie said. Martin let out a chuckle as he sat down across from her. He set his own tray on the table, the spoon clattering against the bowl. The mess hall was mostly empty at this hour, just a few other people scattered at tables across the room. "I'm just trying to look out for my friend," Martin said. "In that case, you're doing a good job," Carrie said. "Are you holding up okay?" Martin asked. Carrie froze for a moment, as if the emotions were going to overtake her again. Her lip quivered, her eyes threatening to well up once more. Martin noticed, then motioned for her to have some soup. Carrie let out a chuckle, shaking her head as she complied. She lifted the spoon to her mouth, the warm liquid sliding down her throat. "It's going to take me a while to process," Carrie said. "That's understandable. I lost one of my friends 5 years ago, and I'm still not sure I've processed it all the way," Martin said. "This is the first time I've really had to deal with loss, at least up close and personal," Carrie said. "I wish I could say it gets easier," Martin said. Martin shrugged as he dug into his own soup. The two of them sat there in silence for several moments, the only sound coming from the slurping of their soup and the clinking of their spoons against the bowl. The mundane noises filled the space between them, a rhythm that required no words. Carrie found herself focusing on the simple act of eating, spoon to bowl, lift, eat, repeat. It was mechanical, but it was something she could control, unlike everything else that had happened today. Their silent meal was interrupted when they heard the door to the mess hall being opened. The sound echoed in the mostly empty space, metal hinges creaking slightly. The duo glanced back at the entrance, both of them surprised to see Captain Foster walking in alone. They tracked his movements as he walked down the line, vanishing behind the wall that separated the dining area from the serving line. He emerged a few seconds later, holding a cup of coffee in his hand. The steam rose from the mug, carried upward by the heat. Rather than exit, however, the captain locked onto them, striding over to them. His boots clicked against the floor, the sound growing louder as he approached. He stopped at their table, looking down at them with an expression that was difficult to read. "Would you mind if I joined you?" Foster asked. "We'd be honored, Captain," Martin said. Foster let out a chuckle as he took a seat, taking a sip of his coffee before setting it on the table. He settled into the chair, his posture relaxed despite the formal setting. "Private Thomas filled me in on what happened out there. First and foremost, I just want to extend my condolences for your loss," Foster said. Both Martin and Carrie were taken aback by the words. It was a shock that Foster cared enough to even take the time to find out what happened, let alone taking the time to come talk to them personally. Officers didn't usually go out of their way for civilians, but here he was. "Thank you, Captain. That means a lot," Carrie said. "Please, call me Foster. And believe me when I say that it's the least I can do," Foster said. "We know you have a lot going on, so for you to take the time to come talk to us," Martin said. Martin trailed off as Foster put his hand up, getting him to stop. The gesture was firm, but not unkind. "We're all in this together. The job you're doing is vitally important, and this mission would fail if it wasn't for people like you putting your lives on the line out there," Foster said. The two civilians gave a half-hearted nod at the praise. The words were nice to hear, but they felt hollow in the wake of Wesley's death. No amount of praise could bring him back. "I want you both to know that whatever you need, you'll have. While we don't have someone on base, I talked to Midnight Mike, and he gave me the number of one of his listeners who is a grief counselor. If you want someone to talk to, we can set that up," Foster said. Carrie and Martin exchanged a glance, both of them shaking their heads ever so slightly. The offer was appreciated, but it wasn't what they needed right now. "The only thing we need to do is honor Wesley's last request," Carrie said. "Which was?" Foster asked. "Finishing this job. This city isn't going to clear itself," Martin said. Foster let out a chuckle, nodding his head in approval. There was respect in his eyes, an understanding of the need to keep moving forward. "I appreciate the dedication, but I am going to insist on the two of you taking a day. Process everything and get some rest," Foster said. "I really think it would best if we got back to it, Foster," Martin said. "I'm sure you do, but that's going to change when you lay your head onto your pillow tonight. The first night is always the toughest to get through," Foster said. Both civilians glanced at each other, concerned, before continuing to listen. Foster's tone had shifted, becoming more personal. This wasn't an officer giving orders. This was someone who had been through loss speaking from experience. "If you do manage to get any sleep, I guarantee it will be the worst you've ever had. Tomorrow you'll be in a bit of a daze, partially from the lack of sleep, but mostly from wondering if the loss of your friend is real. By the time the sun goes down, you'll be ready to sleep for 12 hours, Foster said. The duo nodded, knowing that the captain was right. They could already feel it, the exhaustion mixing with the grief in a way that made everything feel surreal. Like they were moving through water, every action taking more effort than it should. "When you wake up a couple days from now, the three of us will sit here and have a full breakfast before we get you back into the rotation," Foster said. Foster took another long sip of his coffee as he pushed away from the table, getting up and looking down at them. The mug was nearly empty, just a small amount of dark liquid remaining at the bottom. And something to keep in mind tonight when those sleepless hours tick by, the kitchen here opens at 4, and if you ask them real nice, they just might bake you something fresh, Foster said. Foster gave the duo a wink as he started to walk away, leaving them with one last bit. His boots clicked against the floor again, the sound fading as he moved toward the exit. If you need anything at all, there is always someone at the command center. All you have to do is ask, Foster said. Foster nodded to them, receiving one in return as he made his way to the exit, leaving the duo on their own. The door closed behind him with a soft click, the sound final and absolute. That was unexpected, Carrie said. Tell me about it, Martin said. It seems like he genuinely cares, Carrie said. Given everything they've done to try and take back the city, it's safe to say that he does, Martin said. The duo nodded at that before diving back into their soup. They continued eating in silence, still trying to process everything that had happened. The soup was cooling now, no longer steaming, but they ate it anyway. The warmth was comforting, even if nothing else was. Carrie took another spoonful, letting the liquid sit in her mouth for a moment before swallowing. She thought about Wesley, about his sacrifice, about the music still playing as they ran for the helicopter. The image was burned into her mind, something she knew would never fade. Martin finished his soup first, setting the spoon down with a soft clink. He looked across the table at Carrie, watching as she worked through her own bowl. He wanted to say something, to offer some comfort. But he knew that sometimes silence was better. They knew it was going to be a while before they came to terms with what happened to Wesley. But they also knew that once they got back out into the thick of the action that it would help. Work was a distraction, a way to channel the grief into something productive. They could honor Wesley by finishing what he died for. But first, they had to push through the sleepless nights and the grief. The end.